Hi, this is Adina here with today's episode of Courage to be Curious with Adina Tovel. And we are kicking off the month of December. It's hard to believe. Here we are at December of 2021. And every year in December, both in my newsletter and in my podcasts, I usually focus on the big theme of reflection, right? It makes sense. Here we are at the end of the year. And 2021 has been a year different from any other. And we said that at the end of 2020, but wow, has 2021 been even more different than 2020 was for many people too. And so it behooves us, I think, to really set aside time for reflection on where have we traversed this year? What has it been about for us? And then given the journey that we're on, where are we headed in 2022? And so everything I do this month is really going to be focused on this theme of reflection. And so you saw that in the newsletter. If you missed it, go back and grab it. It's in your email. If you want it and you didn't get it, email us at info@couragetobecurious.com because we always send off some great reflection exercises in that. And in this podcast this month, we're really going to be doing some wonderful work in reflection. And my guest for today's episode, and I'm going to introduce her and then come back and sort of set the stage for what we're going to be talking about. But my guest today is somebody who is very near and dear to my heart. Her name is Shelbie Fishman, and Shelbie is a client, a incredibly vibrant, up and coming transformer of the world and potentially of the medical field. She's going to give a little bit more background to herself. And I think an incredible representative of kind of a millennial generation and who's really thinking about who am I in the world and how do I make my mark in the world? And so a perfect person to have a wonderful conversation about reflection in December. So welcome, Shelbie, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Adina. So yes, my name is Shelbie Fishman. I'm 23 years old. I just started medical school at Washington University in St. Louis, School of Medicine, just a couple months ago. I'm originally from just outside of Washington, D.C. So, first time in the Midwest. And it's been a really amazing experience. I met Adina the summer prior to when I started medical school because I had just graduated college the year prior, 2020, had gone through a lot of transitions and very clunky, kind of adjustments, graduating in the midst of a pandemic, moving back home, applying to med school, all in the context of this crazy pandemic year. And I really wasn't sure how to transition back into an environment that was going to be so high stress, while also not really feeling like I had a handle on everything that was going on in my life at the moment. And so I reached out to Adina and I asked her, how I can become a better kind of version of myself so that I can best handle the challenges that are going to come, before me. And, as she and I have talked about extensively, I was really intent on doing this not only for myself, but also for the patients and the people that I was signing up to care for, the rest of my life. I actually just took my official kind of Hippocratic oath at my white coat ceremony recently, where we talked a lot about the commitment that we're making to others through our profession and through really our livelihood. And so Adina has been an incredible resource and really has made all the difference in just the last couple of months in making me able to be the best kind of medical student and I think ultimately physician for those individuals.
Thank you for that, Shelbie. Thank you. And you can already tell from listening to Shelbie that she's an incredibly impressive and beautiful, inside and out young woman. And many people, I look at her and I think 23 years old, wow, and just an incredible amount of courageous curiosity and wisdom and commitment to bringing your best self forward and to bringing your best self in service to others. So I feel totally blessed that you're here with us today.
Me as well.
So on this episode today, and the reason I asked Shelbie to be on is I've been thinking a lot about the importance of caring for our mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. I think these couple of years, right, Shelby, have been so trying on people. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you maybe to talk about how that showed up for you. But, you know, I have just seen it across the board with clients, with people out there, with friends, with family, young people who've been in college through the pandemic, people who've been trying to traverse, you know, high school during the pandemic. And it goes all the way down that living in an environment that is so outside the norm of what we're doing has been really taking its toll, along with everything politically and those things, that we're dedicating this episode to really reflecting on the importance of supporting and nurturing your mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being. And Shelby, I'd love for you to say a little bit of how this whole couple of years has impacted you and what really brought you to the awareness that you needed to do something different and you wanted to do something different.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'll just go back a little bit to sort of the impetus of reaching out to you and sort of what led me to this work, which is, when I was in college, I was a pre-med student kind of from the start and had always sort of followed, I think, what was expected of me by the standards of, what a pre-med student should achieve. Had always been, a very kind of high intensity person, really go, didn't really take a lot of time to stop and think about what I really wanted and needed in the day to day, and was very focused on just kind of getting to where, to me, what meant progress and success. But I never really took the time to define what that looked like for me in kind of the broader fulfillment sense. And so when I graduated college and the world came to a stop at the same time that everything that I had been doing for the last 4 years also came to a stop, it was like my entire barometer was totally out of whack. And I just felt like I had lost all sense of really control over, all the things that had been propelling me for the last 4 years. And something that, you and I had talked about, I remember even during my first session, was just that, a lot of people that are drawn to these high intensity kind of professions have such difficulty bringing themselves back down to that equilibrium state. And I will never forget hearing you say those words, because that was exactly what I was craving. I really wanted to get back to a place where I felt centered and stable, and like I could make decisions that were best for me at, on a day-to-day basis. And, it's crazy to think, that wasn't even that long ago, but I really did not feel capable of doing that, because everything that had been my normal up until that point was essentially gone. I was no longer, living in a college dorm. I was back at home with my parents. I felt like some of my independence had been lost. And then, of course, we were going through this global pandemic where everybody was feeling like their normals were completely evaporated. So I think for me, mental and spiritual well-being really, really stems from that feeling of knowing yourself to the point where you can make decisions that are best for you. And I know that sounds simple. That used to sound very simple to me, but it is so profound, so much more profound than that, in that you really have to do the work and take the time to get to know who you are and what is best for you. And that changes, that's not a sedentary thing. It's dynamic and it's fluid. And, you and I talk a lot about these seasons of our lives that we have. And so being really attentive and mindful, and then acting accordingly is for me what mental and spiritual well-being has become.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it is, we talk about these words, mental health. I mean, we're talking about it all over the place right now because of the reasons we just discussed. Spiritual, some people feel more comfortable with, and some people are still getting acclimated to the idea of spiritual well-being. But I think as you mentioned some of the key components of, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, which is you're feeling rooted in a sense of meaning and purpose, right? That I'm not just kind of going on the treadmill, and I'm not just sort of following everything, and I'm not in a state of perpetual motion and momentum that I have no idea what my purpose or meaning is.
Yeah.
This, way of relieving stress, because if I feel spiritually rooted and, mentally clear, that I'm able to navigate whatever kinds of stressors come up, I have a plan, I have an approach. And, you know, when we can do those things, there is this feeling of hope. And I think that this is one of the biggest things that mental and spiritual, emotional well-being provide for us, is that even when things are hard, we have confidence in ourselves, and we have confidence that we can move through it, and that there will be something good on the other side, right? Something for us on the other side, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the word rooted is so, so, so important. Especially just in thinking about truly what roots are, in that, you know, they keep you grounded, and that visual, you know, we talked a lot about that. And that has been something that has carried me through, knowing, you know, you ask a lot, what do you know to be true for you? And the answers to those questions becoming your roots, becoming almost like that armor that you carry with you everywhere, that can help you defend and, you know, be ready for anything that life is going to throw at you. It's a really, really powerful thing.
What do you think makes this so difficult? Like, let's talk even about your generation right now, because I think that you're in a place that can be hit almost extra hard with this. I think we're all hit in different ways. So maybe it's just the unique hitting of it for your generation. But what do you think is most impacting people your age? Because I'm personally discovering I have more clients in your age group than I've ever had over my 10 years of practice. So something is happening. What is making it so demanding right now to feel grounded?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the accessibility that young people have to essentially anything that they want to consume at any given moment is more stimulation than probably anyone can and should handle, and really that anyone even asked for. So I think that this era of, you know, you have all of these opportunities at your fingertips, while very exciting, is also incredibly overwhelming. And if you don't take the time to ask yourself, where do I really want my energy to go? Where do I really want to focus my attention based on those roots that I have laid for myself? You'll go everywhere. You know, you'll take every opportunity to look at, consume everything. And before you know it, before you're consciously aware, you are completely drained and you feel like you have lost yourself. And so I think that, you know, my generation has also really been raised in a way that, again, it's kind of a double-edged sword, where I was, you know, very much taught you can do anything that you want to, you know, like a woman, and kind of, you know, being a successful woman has always been really important to me. And I love that. But it's also, you know, the opportunities are endless, and I want to make the most of my time on earth here and like really make an impact and kind of have this legacy. And that's a really, you know, that's a big kind of burden to bear that you know, a lot of people have not necessarily thought about or really had the opportunity to think about before. And I take that very seriously. And so I think young people are kind of feeling the weight of a lot more kind of on their shoulders at a younger age, and they're not really taught what to do with that. And so I am a huge advocate for this work at a young age. I wish I had started this younger, to be completely honest, because it completely changes the way you move through the world and makes everything just more meaningful. It lightens that burden. It teaches you, you know, just how much capability you have to be able to make, you know, pave your own way, which is really amazing.
So you talked, Shelby, about the proliferation of things that sort of tug at us, right? You know, we have all these things, and it's true. Actually, everybody is vying for our attention, right? And we almost have to become like warrior about what we're going to give our attention to and how to protect our boundaries, because those who want our attention are getting better and better and better and better all the time at trying to grab it, right? But I'm also wondering if you can speak to, I don't know if this is your experience, but especially with social media and things like that, the comparative nature, right? That here's what it looks like. Here's what fun looks like. Here's what success looks like. Here's what your peers are doing. What role does sort of the comparison that is set up by having access to other people's lives all the time, how does that impact?
Yeah, I think that's a huge impact that also really gets built into your subconscious over time, which is that your goals in life oftentimes like get morphed into somebody else's, because you're constantly looking at the way that other people live their lives. And I mean, because Instagram and Facebook and social media in general have become kind of this mindless activity where you're consuming it almost without even thinking about it, you don't realize that, when you are, maybe feeling down and you go on your phone to distract yourself, what you're actually doing is, just perpetuating whatever you were feeling beforehand, which is that, whatever path you're on right now is not good enough. It's not valuable enough. What somebody else is doing is better. And it sends you into this spiral of comparison where I just think it makes it all the more confusing to really know yourself, because you're incorporating these curated, almost facades that other people are putting up into what should be true for you, when in reality, those are fake to begin with. So it is a very slippery slope. I think it's very much a part of my generation's psyche. And it seeps into all other parts of life. I think it also speaks to, people that are already intense, kind of, so to speak, and in some ways maybe intrinsically motivated by it's kind of have a competitive nature, so to speak. Like, those people are even more susceptible to this. And I think a lot of times that creates a really dangerous combination.
There was something that you shared with me early on in your medical school. You're still pretty early on, but very early on. It came up maybe in the first few weeks of medical school, where you were talking about the fact that you had the option to do this pass-fail, or it was pass-fail, but that some people were still so competitive. And, how much should you be worried about what your final grades were, or could you embrace the pass-fail nature of things? And I would just love for you to share a little bit of, how did you work your way through that? And, again, it was sort of, what were you being warrior about as you were trying to find your way through this?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is, to date, probably the clearest manifestation of how I've really incorporated what we've talked about into my, concretely into my life. So yeah, like Adina mentioned, my curriculum at med school, as most medical schools are these days, is pass-fail. And that's a very sharp departure from how most people in college that, wanted to go to medical school had lived their lives. Most people, all they cared about was the high, what the percentage on their exam scores could be. And, having had that experience for so long of really just caring so much and investing so much energy in what that grade was going to be, I knew that it was going to be an adjustment to try and let that go, to relinquish some of that energy. And I went back to what, Adina and I had talked about. And I said, okay, here's this new kind of set of guidelines. What do I know to be true for me in terms of what do I want to get out of my medical experience? What is going to make me the most fulfilled here? And what do I know, kind of on the converse, is going to do the opposite? What's going to be detrimental or kind of harmful to, or counterproductive to those goals? And I realized that this pass-fail thing was such a gift, and it was an opportunity to really live out a lot of those goals that I had set out for myself during my work with Adina. So I think, an example of this is, I asked myself, at the end of each day, if I have, memorized 100% of what what might be tested on, but not been able to participate in any of the extracurricular activities, not been able to get involved in any leadership positions, not been able to shadow and build relationships with faculty members, would I feel fulfilled? And, I asked myself that question. I was curious about what that answer would be. And the answer was no, I wouldn't feel fulfilled. I would rather meet the standards of what was being set out for me rather than, continue on the treadmill that had been set by my past. I wanted to change that behavior and say, what would really fulfill me is to learn 70% of the material and pass, and leave time for myself to engage with the community around me and really become a part of all the amazing opportunities that the university has. And I think that is where this armor, I'm kind of hinging on the warrior part of this, which is this armor of the roots that I had laid before of what really matters to me. What do I know to be true for me? I know that I am a person that really values connection and relationships with people. And I can't build those if I'm spending
Hmm.
12 hours in the library each day. And the beautiful thing is I didn't need to do that anymore. So there was really nothing stopping me other than myself. And so I think that is really the difference between, had I not worked with Adina and not really done that work, I guarantee you I would have stayed on the treadmill of I have to get the highest A no matter what. So yeah, that was my experience.
Well, as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing all of the courageous questions you asked yourself, right? All of the things you said is I asked myself this, and then I asked myself this, right? Which I love, sort of referencing this, the power of asking yourself the questions in order to get to what matters and in order to help guide yourself to making the decisions that feel most aligned to you, which is beautiful. Which is beautiful. So you mentioned, I mean, we just talked about it, some of the questions that you asked yourself, and I just were one of the primary tools that you took. It's like, oh, okay, I should actually stop and pause and ask myself some questions and reflect on things rather than just keep going and going and going. And that will help me to feel a greater sense of alignment and purpose. I would love for you to share just one other tool that maybe we discussed that you felt has been instrumental in helping you to feel connected to you and rooted in you as you're traversing life.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a bit of a smaller thing, but it has made a really big difference in my life. I think, this was something that we talked about sort of the tail end of our work together. And something that I had shared with you was that I was nervous about my interactions with people that had a lot more experience with me in the field. And so, medicine is known to be this very hierarchical organization. You have your attendings and then your residents and then your medical students, and it's very known that that's an intimidating part of this career path, obviously, as is present in many other careers. But there's a lot of I guess fear in approaching people that have more experience than you and making a bad impression and having that impact your career. And while at the same time, trying to learn from them and make the most out of those interactions. And so I mentioned to Adina that I was feeling really anxious about going back into an environment with people that I felt really intimidated and honestly less than and kind of inferior to. And something that she recommended I do is, 5 minutes before, entering a room with individuals that I might feel intimidated by, taking a deep breath. And, she has great breathing practices that I won't go into here. And it does go back to questions, but I would say even before that, just beyond questions, reminding myself, I am such and such. So what are the answers to those questions of what I knew to be true for me? Reminding myself of those and feeling myself be rooted in what those answers are. And then this one phrase I think is so amazing is you never know when you can be somebody else's angel. And that I really think is something I have come to live by. I think you mentioned it to me once, but it has made such a difference. And I truly do. I say that to myself every time I'm about to enter into a conversation with somebody that, I might feel, is superior to me, whatever that might mean. And it's so empowering because it also forced me to think about all the times in my past when that has absolutely been true, when I had no idea that I might be able to help somebody. And it takes away all the fear out of that power differential, because all of a sudden you realize that you bring something to the table, you have value. This isn't a one-sided thing where I'm just here to impress. Like every interaction, every conversation is an opportunity to potentially make somebody else's day better. And, as I mentioned before, that's really why I got into this work in the first place, is I wanted to be the best kind of physician and, service member that I could be. And so that really spoke to me because that spoke to my values that I feel very rooted in.
Oh my gosh, so beautiful. And I love that that's the thing that you brought forward, because it is that teaching of how can you be somebody's angel today just changes everything in that dynamic and relationship.
Yes.
So as I've shared with you, and one of the reasons, Shelbie, that you are a spokesperson on this episode too, and thinking about this work of reflection is, and this is for the first time announcing it formally to the Courage to Be Curious community, right? Is that I've recognized over time how important developing this as a practice is, that asking the questions, taking time for reflection is not something that most of us have built into our day. Our day often feels like, even if we put aside the time, it can just sort of, once it takes off, it runs away with our time. And yet, if we don't stop and pause and take this time to ask the questions and do the reflection, that we become very disconnected from ourselves, right? We become disconnected from what's most important. And we just suddenly find ourselves like in the midst of the rapids being carried down the river, and we have no idea if we're going to hit a rock or where we're going to land, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for Courage to Be Curious, and, after about 10 years of doing this work, really thinking, how can I bring this, create a community that can do this together, so that it's not always, a one-on-one for those who are able, but really a community of practice of really asking the questions, sitting to take the time. And so Courage to Be Curious is launching right now. There's actually a pilot program running, of which Shelbie is a part, where we are doing pilot sessions, wisdom warrior sessions, where we are taking this time for pausing, reflecting, and connecting back to self. And I wanted, to just ask you, you've been through this individually. What do you feel like is the benefit of coming together in community with people, all taking the time to pause, reflect, and connect together?
Yes, absolutely. I'm very excited to answer this question, because it also kind of goes back to another really concrete tool that you have taught me, which is you very, so astutely have kind of renamed anxiety for me as almost like an egocentrism, where you kind of feel like you are the center of your own universe, and your problems and, I don't even know if problems is the right word, but whatever you're feeling is kind of outsized in a way. And, something that I also do more now than I ever did before is, when I am feeling anxious about myself, I call a friend and I ask them about their day. And I kind of take myself outside of that egocentric view, and it really just evaporates a lot of those acute feelings of stress. It doesn't obviously get rid of whatever I might be experiencing, but it really, really de-escalates what I'm feeling. And I think that is, in a sense, what is so beneficial about a community of practice, is not only can you learn from what other people are benefiting from, but you really can get outside of yourself. And I mean, it's truly magical is not the right word, but it is incredible the impact that moment of just taking time to listen to somebody else, and really just taking some energy away from whatever you might be hyper focusing on, brings so much clarity to your own world. And so the community of practice, I think, is beneficial both for learning and for understanding other people's techniques, hearing other people's stories, building those relationships that are also really fortifying. And then kind of at the crux of it is, taking yourself outside of that kind of inward focus.
Oh, I love that, Shelby. I mean, you said it, I think, even better than I did. She's going to have to become one of our wisdom warrior facilitators. But, this idea of how, when we come together, because I think when we do get into feeling anxious or unnerved about something, and you kind of mentioned this, is that we feel like we're the center of the universe, and we also feel like we're the only person this is happening to, and it is like all eyes are on us, or it's the most important thing. And it gets supersized in a sense, right? We supersize our story.
Yeah.
But when we come into community, and it's amazing how often somebody says, oh my gosh, right? Like, yeah, I feel that too. I feel that too. There's a little bit of a normalizing of like, oh, this is what people experience in this kind of moment. And we can all actually make it through this together, that there's a path through this. This isn't something that's going to consume us or take us down. It's something that people experience, and it's okay.
Exactly. And I just have to add that I think what's so powerful about that is a lot of times I think when we reach out to our support systems, we get a lot back that is still focused on us, which oftentimes we think that's what we want. We want, advice, we want to be consoled. And I think sometimes, while that might be that immediate gratification in that moment, and it is absolutely necessary, when really kind of working through things, for me, what I have found to be most powerful is hearing other people's stories, taking the focus away from myself and seeing kind of that solidarity, and learning from what's worked for other people that might have had more experience than I. So it's really really amazing. And I'm so excited.
Yeah, so I want to just share a minute or two about what's going to happen in this community of practice. And then Shelby ask you, who do you think would be, this is for? Who do you think are good participants? But so in this community of practice, and if you are listening now, it is mid-December or early December, I should actually say, and we still have a few pilot sessions. And so I sent out there's a pilot group who has been participating in some early sessions, but as a listener of Courage to Be Curious now, I want to be able to invite you in. We have a few pilot sessions left that if you want to get information about how to participate, like immediately, send an email to info@couragetobecurious.com and we will get you the information for that if you are so intrigued. And I know Shelby will be in on some of those sessions. The goal of these community practice sessions really is to take us into that space of pausing, reflecting, and connecting. They are 30-minute sessions, signing up like the same way you would for a yoga class or your HIIT class or whatever it might be, that an opportunity to be brought in, get centered, separate from the world outside, bring forth a query, one of those courageous questions like Shelby has been asking of herself, allowing us to ask it in the context of community, a little bit of guidance from me as to how can we go in and explore that? What might you do with this question? Some guided reflection, and then really thinking about how do I take this out into my world? How do I take whatever insights have been gained, either from me personally or things others have shared through chat, into my world in order to help me feel more grounded and go forth with more intention so that I feel more meaning and purpose. And literally, these are 30-minute hits for your mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So this is what we're doing in these pilot sessions. This is what we're doing in this community of practice that is going to launch fully in 2022. But Shelby, as you've been thinking about this and been, kind of participating in this work, who do you think these sessions are for? Who do you think should consider signing up and participating?
I think these sessions are really for everyone, but I think in particular, anybody who, well, first, let me just plug again, young people out there, young people everywhere, millennials, Gen Zers. I think that this work is so important for us because, we have a life ahead of us that we want to make the most out of and find the most meaning from. And so I would especially plug those for the young people out there that might not really even know that this kind of work exists, that in this way, when I preach Adina's gospel to my social circles, a lot of people have never heard of work like this. And so I would, definitely say that, people who are not aware or who, have never found themselves in a place to be doing something like this before definitely would benefit. And then I think kind of more specifically, I think anybody who is really looking to be able to live their life in a way that feels more authentic and more true to themselves, and something that, if anybody is struggling to just make their life more them, which I think is really just, a simple but pointed way of saying that, then, you should definitely participate. And I will add that, a lot of the practices that Adina and I have talked about, I think, she's mentioning specifically that there's kind of 30-minute sessions, and it's really rejuvenating, and it doesn't take long to engage in this work. I, ask myself a question for a minute a day, and it changes my entire day. So that's really the benefit of this work is, it takes obviously time to kind of build an understanding and incorporate those into your life, but they're simple and they're concrete and they're accessible to anybody. Anybody can, make this a part of their life. And so I think that, these sessions will really make a difference for everybody.
Thank you, Shelby. And I think I'm going to go off the show just like you to let you take the lead, because you are such an amazing message. So yeah, you're hired, right? You're a new host for the Courage to Be Curious, the Adina Tovell podcast show. So fabulous. No, really, as you can tell, it's clear to see why I think so highly of this incredible young woman who, yes, and it's interesting, you're on the cusp sort of here between millennial and Gen Z, right? You get a little bit of the dose of both, right in between that generation. So, I mean, I don't really have a lot more to add on top of what Shelby said, but what I really want to encourage everybody who's listening is just to hear from me that this is really feels for me. I've been doing this work for about 10 years now, and been hosting this podcast for about 4 years, asking these courageous questions, game-changing questions, inviting people to get curious within. And so for me, this is this expression and this next level of let's all get curious together in real time and real space. And it's one of the reasons I've thought a lot about it. These sessions are not going to be recorded and then distributed later. It really is about showing up. It's us showing up and doing this work together face to face, like you and I are here face to face today, because there's something about the shared energy, right, of being in a space with people that really does help to bring us out of ourselves and helps us to feel part of a community, supported by that community, and infused with energy and insight by that community. So, Shelby, I'm so grateful to you, to the way that you've expressed all of this and invited people to consider something that they might not have ever thought of before, because you've done that beautifully, and you've made it a very welcoming space for people to be. So thank you.
Oh, of course, of course. Adina knows I'm endlessly grateful for her. So this is, my absolute pleasure.
And so, as wrapping up this episode, and we have more to come in terms of reflection and courage to be curious for the month of December. So keep staying with us. You can find out we're always putting stuff out on Instagram. You can follow us at Courage to be Curious. And on LinkedIn, we have a Courage to be Curious page where all of our podcasts release. If you're not yet signed up for our newsletter and our podcast distribution by email, go on to couragetobecurious.com and sign up for that. And again, I want to invite you, if you want to participate in some of these final few community of practice sessions through the month of December, actually for the next week and a half or so from the time of the release of this podcast, then go ahead and send me an email at info@couragetobecurious.com, because as a listener, I'm eager to have you participate, to say, raise your hand and say, yes, I want to be part of this courageous practice. I want to see what this is about. And then, of course, we'll launch the full program in 2022. But thank you, Shelby, for participating today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time as always. And yes, everyone sign up. It will absolutely be worth it.
And thank you for listening today. Continue to engage with us, and we will be back again next week.